Oh, the politicians are at it again. There is no God, at least not in the Democratic Party platform. The Democrats, in addition to endorsing gay marriage, they dropped the references to Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and they left all references of God out of their platform this year.
Who broke the story, Pat?
Yes.
David Brody, our CBN's phenomenal news reporter. He has this report on what happened and the reaction at the convention.
Democrats took to the floor here in Charlotte to hear speeches and also take part in a traditional ritual approving the party's platform. But this year, something's different. There's not a single reference to God, despite the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee telling CBN News this just a few days ago.
We really think it's important that that we not allow the Republicans to corner the market on the faith community.
Yet the party's language seems to be moving in the opposite direction. Back in 2004, there were 7 platform references to God. Then in 2008, a single mention stating how everyone had the chance to make the most of their God-given potential. This year, that paragraph simply says, in America, hard work should pay off, responsibility should be rewarded, and each one of us should be able to go as far as our talent and drive take us. No God-given potential line, but to some here in Charlotte, it's not a problem.
I wouldn't worry about it. It doesn't bother me from the standpoint that I know where I stand. I know that there is one. And that's it.
The party platform is really just a document that really doesn't carry much weight at all. It doesn't set policy, it just lays out principles. But a Pew Research study actually shows that Americans pay more attention to the party's platform than they do the speeches of candidates Mitt Romney and Barack Obama. Some ministers are definitely paying attention. Reverend Michael Stevens pastors a Charlotte area church. Many of his members still struggle with whether to support the president this time around because of his support for same-sex marriage. That position also changed in the 2012 party platform.
It makes me feel as a pastor that there's all respect and reverence for the church and the clergy has been removed from the Democratic Party. They're willing to roll the dice and say, we can win without your votes. And we can win, even if it means full frontal and being offensive.
Unlike 2008, this platform also leaves out any mention of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. That's also an important issue for Christians. Democrat officials point out that there is a paragraph on the importance of faith.
The fact that we talk about faith more than 20 times in our platform, I'd go toe-to-toe with anybody about how we see the significance and importance of faith in American life.
Democrats have been holding daily prayer services down here, but the only headlines coming out of Charlotte on faith so far have not been flattering. David Brody, CBN News, at the Democratic National Convention.
You remember, I don't know, you don't remember because none of us are that old, but back in the 1850s or 60s, there was a charge at one party. It was the party of Romanism and rebellion. And I don't know what you label the Democrats now, but it's the party of gays, godliness, and whatever else. But I mean, that's same-sex marriage is in the platform. They want to go along with that as a right. And I'm just astounded. But it's amazing. Dick Durbin was interviewed on Fox News last night, and he was asked a simple question: why'd you take the reference out? So, well, the conclusions that are being drawn from this are much more far-reaching than we like to imagine, and I think it's unfair. And the interviewer, Bret Baier, said, well, all I want to know is, why'd you drop the reference? Well, you just have no idea how this is being distorted. Well, why did you do it? Well, you have no idea. It was just incredible. I mean, it was laughable because they can't defend it. And you ask yourself, you're going to go before the American people, and that's going to be the face you're going to present to America. You have insulted the Catholic Church with your rules. You've insulted right to work states. You have insulted certain union groups with your stand on the pipeline. And now you're going after God. I mean, it makes no sense, but that's what they want to do. Well, you can see more of David's coverage of the Democratic Convention Friday at 9:30 a.m. on the ABC Family Channel and on CBNNews.com. Lee Webb has more of our top stories from the CBN newsroom. Lee.
Well, Pat, it's clear the Democrats are going on the attack. The Democratic National Convention officially kicking off last night in Charlotte. Speakers criticized Mitt Romney while the First Lady praised her husband. Mark Martin has that story.
Being president doesn't change who you are. No, it reveals who you are.
First Lady Michelle Obama says her husband still stands behind working families.
For Barack, success isn't about how much money you make. It's about the difference you make in people's lives.
President Obama and their daughters watched the First Lady's speech from the White House. Others at the Democratic National Convention went on the attack.
Mitt Romney talks a lot about all the things he's fixed. I can tell you, Massachusetts was not one of them.
A new face hit the national stage. San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro. He's the first Latino to deliver a keynote address.
My mother fought hard for civil rights so that instead of a mop, I could hold this microphone.
The president is counting on turnout from Latino voters and women in November. But a new ABC News Washington Post poll shows the percentage of women who approve of the president has dropped 11 points since April. At the first night of the convention, delegates praised President Obama for helping win approval of health care legislation and for supporting gay marriage and abortion rights. The president of the National Abortion Rights Action League Pro-Choice America, Nancy Keenan, said, quote, "We cannot trust Mitt Romney to protect our health. He would repeal Obamacare, taking away our access to better maternity and prenatal care and the law's near universal coverage of birth control." President Obama arrives in Charlotte today, and tonight former President Bill Clinton speaks. Mark Martin, CBN News.
And the convention got underway with this news that the U.S. national debt has reached a new milestone, now topping $16 trillion. That means lawmakers and the winner of the November presidential election will have to pass and sign a law raising the debt ceiling. That limit stands at $16.39 trillion. The debt has skyrocketed under President Obama. He has presided over 4 straight years of deficits over $1 trillion. Meanwhile, a new survey from the World Economic Forum shows America's ability to compete on the global stage is down for the 4th year. U.S. competitiveness has now dropped to 7th place. California Governor Jerry Brown will soon decide whether to approve a bill aimed at banning therapy for teenagers who want to change their sexual orientation. It is the first attempt in the nation to make so-called conversion therapy illegal. The bill's supporters say the therapy is dangerous, but some mental health experts caution that the research is incomplete. Randy Thomason is president of a group called Save California. He opposes the bill on the grounds that it attacks parental rights.
This is an infringement upon the relationship between the professional counselor and the client, the parents. This is actually an infringement of the state, and the state ought not go there.
But that's not all. Also on Jerry Brown's desk, a bill that would allow children to have multiple parents. Thomason says that law would create chaos in the courts.
If a judge so decrees, a child can have 3 or 4 or more legal parents. First, think about the conflict in civil court, family court, other courts, probate court. Think about the parents conflicting and vying for decision-making in the child's life.
Yeah, supporters say the bill is needed because of new developments like surrogate birth and same-sex parenthood. Pat, Governor Brown has until the end of this month to make a decision on both bills, the parent and the therapy bills.
You know, Lee, you ask what kind of a society we live in. You know, there was a judge in Massachusetts who ordered the state to pay for a prisoner, you know, like a convicted felon doing a life sentence, to have a sex change operation. Why? Because the judge thought that it would be nice for him to have it, and the taxpayers of Massachusetts should have to pay for it. Isn't that strange? Doesn't that shock you?
It's crazy.
Of course it's crazy. Well, it was said some time ago when they were trying to legalize same-sex marriage that one day you would have what they call polyamory, which means a whole bunch of sex partners all living together, that you would, if you could have one kind of marriage, it's no longer between a man and a woman, but it's between two men or two women, then why not one man and three women? Why not? I mean, what's wrong with polygamy? And what's wrong with having a civil union between six people? You know, I mean, what would stop it? I mean, where do you draw the line? I mean, marriage has been defined through history as a union between a man and a woman. So well, things are getting curiouser and curiouser, and Mark, we're on a slippery slope, and we're sliding real fast. Lee.
Well, Pat, speaking of that, a public notary in Brazil has granted two women and a man the right to live together in a three-way civil union. The three say they love each other as equals. They claim they're like any other non-married couple living together. The three now have some of the legal benefits of marriage in Brazil, but not all. The third person cannot be a legal parent to a child conceived by the others. Religious rights groups say the union is not valid. Brazilian law defines marriage as a union between two people, and polygamy is illegal in that country. Three United Nations agencies fear a global food crisis may be on the horizon. As Dale Hurd reports, they're urging governments to curb rising prices of corn, wheat, and soybeans.
The sharp rise in food prices in recent months threatens to make life even harder for millions of people around the world, especially in poor countries.
The situation is very serious right now. We've seen that food prices have increased sharply in the month of July, especially for soybeans and maize.
A prolonged drought in the U.S., the #1 exporter of corn, wheat, and soybeans, has helped drive up commodity prices. The UN says global food prices rose 6% in July. It's even begun to affect donations to food banks.
And we're beginning to see some of the impacts of the drought here in Washington state. So many of the products that would typically be donated to a local food bank are suddenly now being diverted.
The UN says countries should reduce ethanol production requirements when food supplies become scarce. Livestock farmers in the U.S. have demanded the government relax biofuel production quotas because corn feed is becoming so expensive. 40% of the U.S. corn crop goes to ethanol production. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Pat, what's the solution here?
What's the solution? First of all, is to get the government's hands out of the market. I mean, they have put arbitrary quotas down in terms of how much ethanol you have to have, which means you're going to divert huge amounts of corn to making this strange blend of gasoline. And as a result, the food prices are going through the roof. The price of corn has gone skyrocketing. And if the government was out of it, the market would at least balance itself out. But every time the government puts its heavy hand in trying to favor one particular type of enterprise versus another, it makes mistakes because it cannot predict all the future. And every time you have a controlled economy, you have bad things happening. So my solution is get the government out of all these standards they're putting into effect. You've got to have this, so many of this, and so many of the others. They're not omniscient. Lee?
Pat, bad health could mean bad grades for teenagers. Researchers at New York University found that teenagers with metabolic syndrome had higher risk for poor development of their brains. Metabolic syndrome is a combination of several major health problems, including obesity, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol. Those teens could not read as well, scored worse on math tests, and took longer to get some things done. And some key parts of their brains were smaller as well. 1 in 12 American children and teenagers had metabolic syndrome. Researchers say they hope this study will encourage families to change their lifestyle. Pat, I can't help but wonder if there's some behavioral issues involved here. I mean, if a child does not have the discipline to push himself away from the dinner table, does he have the discipline to do his homework at night?
Well, of course not. I mean, all these things are factors together. I mean, you sit on a couch and you run video games all day long, so you don't exercise, and then you get stuffed with all this junk food. There are very healthy foods out there. If they eat fruit and vegetables, they fill up, and everything is clicking and working. And if you load it up with carbohydrates and high fructose corn syrup and all that stuff, you will wind up with metabolic syndrome. And that's just a fancy name for saying that your body's screwed up.
I think good old-fashioned fresh air and a run around the block does the body good.
So what do you do with your little boy? You let him sit around and pig out at the table?
What do you think, Pat Robertson?
And I think you don't, but I just wanted you to say so.
Of course not.
All right, what do you do to him?
Well, you know, with us, you know, as the parent, I control what goes in his mouth, number one.
Yes.
And two, why would I expect my son to run around if I don't run around myself? So if we go ride our bikes, we ride our bikes together. We roller skate, we do it together.
My daughter-in-law said something. She came by, you know, Labor Day, and her husband, my son, my oldest son, and she said, you know, our children have 4 living grandparents. Mm-hmm. And she said, that's very unusual.
It's very unusual, yeah.
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 And then they began to talk about that both of them, they came from families. We stressed health food. Mm-hmm. And my son felt he was being so deprived because we insisted on him eating whole wheat bread in these sandwiches. And they used to try to trade him off for these white doughy things, mm-hmm. you know, that had no value to them whatsoever.
Yep, exactly.
But, you know, but they were commenting on the fact they begin to recognize after they...
It makes a difference.
They cross 50 that maybe their old man knew something after all.
Maybe.
All right.
More Americans than ever are using food stamps. A record high 46.87 million Americans used them in June. That's 3.3% higher than a year ago. Food stamp spending has almost doubled in the last 4 years alone. As of September of last year, it was at a record $75.7 billion. Food stamps are the U.S. Department of Agriculture's largest annual expense. A federal judge says the state of Massachusetts must provide a sex change operation for an inmate serving a life sentence. Michelle Koselleck was born a man but received hormone treatments and is now living as a woman in an all-male prison. The judge ruled the surgery is the only way to treat Koselleck's, quote, serious medical need. Critics denounced the ruling, calling it abuse of taxpayer dollars, and they're pushing for it to be overturned. We'll keep you posted. You can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.